The sharp click of heels on polished marble cut through the silence of the 15th floor corridor. It wasn't unusual for the corporate tower to be quiet at midday, but today the silence carried a strange weight, like the air was holding its breath. Somewhere behind the frosted glass of the main conference room, the fate of a multi-million-dollar empire was being decided. And at the far end of the corridor, a woman in a faded blue cleaning uniform pushed her cart forward, unaware she was walking straight into a moment that would change every life in that building. Her name was Livia Silva. She moved with the rhythm of someone who had repeated the same motions for years spray. Wipe, sweep, collect. The humid snow polo heat pressed her uniform against her skin, but she kept her head high. The mirror in the ladies' restroom reflected a face framed by a tightly tied bun, eyes steady but distant. In the boardroom, CEO Augusto Vilas was in the middle of his pitch. Tall, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit cut to perfection, he commanded the room with fluent English and a confidence that seemed unshakable. But beneath that polished exterior, a storm was brewing. The German investors seated across the table Muller and Schmeith represented 50 million euros in salvation for his failing tech empire. The deal was his last lifeline. Without it, months of desperate maneuvering would collapse into bankruptcy. Augusto's voice was smooth, his hands illustrating projections on the sleek glass wall display. But as he advanced to the next slide, a sudden, sharp pressure bloomed in his chest. He faltered, just for a second. His vision blurred at the edges. He tried to power through, unwilling to show weakness, but the pressure turned to pain deep, crushing, relentless. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. He swallowed hard, his pulse pounding in his ears. The room tilted. Then it happened. Mid-sentence, Augusto's hand shot to his chest. He gasped once, sharply, and his knees buckled. The heavy leather chair caught him as his body went slack. Senator Vilas. Muller's voice sliced through the tension, followed by the scraping of chairs and the metallic clatter of a pen hitting the table. From the corridor, Livia froze at the sound. It wasn't the usual bustle of a meeting breaking up. This was panic. She recognized the tone instantly. Her steps quickened until she reached the frosted glass door. Through the blurred panel, she saw him. Augusto slumped forward, his face pale and slick with sweat, his lips tinged with a frightening blue. His hands trembled violently as he clutched his chest. She knew. Every instinct, every muscle in her body reacted at once. It was a massive heart attack. And yet, for a single moment, she hesitated. 2 days earlier, he had walked into his office while she was cleaning and barely glanced at her. "Try not to leave that chemical smell," he'd said coldly, rubbing his temples. "I have a headache." No greeting, no eye contact, just dismissal. But now Allie was dying. Livia pushed the door open so hard it banged against the wall. "Move," she barked, her voice cutting through the chaos. "I'm a doctor. He's having a heart attack." The room went still. Fernanda, Augusto's secretary, blinked at her. "What?" "Cardiologist," Livia snapped. 15 years in the emergency department at Hospital das Clinicas. Now get me space now? She was already kneeling beside him before anyone processed the words. Her fingers found his pulse weak, erratic. His breathing was shallow, broken. "He's about to go into cardiac arrest," she said flatly. Her tone carried the authority of someone who had seen death up close too many times. "I'll call the hospital." Schmidt fumbled for his phone. "Did you call SAMU?" Livia demanded. "They said 15 minutes. Fernanda's voice cracked. "Then we have one shot." In one swift motion, she tore open Augusto's shirt, revealing his sweat-soaked chest. She positioned her hands and began chest compressions, steady, powerful, counting under her breath. 1, 2, 3, 4. "Get me a cold towel and bottled water now," she barked. Fernanda ran. Muller stood frozen. Schmidt obeyed, propping up Augusto's legs with a chair. "Breathe, Augusto," she murmured between compressions. "Not today. You're not leaving today." Seconds stretched into eternity. Then his pulse vanished. "Cardiac arrest," she said, and immediately began mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Her own heartbeat thundered, but her hands stayed steady. "You're not dying on me," she whispered fiercely. "Not like this." 2 minutes later, a faint sound escaped his throat, a weak gasp. His eyelids fluttered. She adjusted her grip, continuing until his breathing steadied into shallow but regular pulls of air. By the time the paramedics burst in, Livia was already rattling off his vitals. Cardiologist. Massive myocardial infarction, 40 seconds arrest, full resuscitation. Pulse weak but stable, BP dropping. He needs oxygen and immediate transport. The paramedics exchanged quick glances. One of them nodded. "Excellent work, Doctor." As they lifted him onto the stretcher, Augusto's hand shot out and gripped hers. "Why?" His voice was barely audible. "After how I treated you." Her fingers tightened around his. "Because I'm a doctor. And doctors save lives no matter whose." The ambulance doors slammed shut with a hollow echo, leaving the corridor in tense silence. Inside the conference room, the investors exchanged uneasy glances. Their expressions had shifted, not only because the CEO they were negotiating with had almost died in front of them, but because they had just witnessed something that would soon spread like wildfire through Snow Hollow's financial district. A cleaning lady who was actually a cardiologist. It sounded like a headline ripped straight from a business magazine. Fernanda stood frozen in the doorway, still clutching the bottled water she had fetched too late. She couldn't stop replaying the image of Livia's hands, precise, unshaking, powerful, forcing life back into Augusta's body. This woman, who until 10 minutes ago was invisible in the corporate halls, had just outperformed every doctor Fernanda had ever seen. Fernanda. Muller's deep, accented voice broke the silence. "Who exactly is she?" Fernanda opened her mouth, then closed it. I don't know. She cleans here twice a week." Muller's eyes narrowed. "She's not just a cleaner." Across the city, the ambulance tore through the traffic, sirens wailing. Inside, Livia monitored the portable ECG while adjusting the oxygen mask over Augusto's face. She kept her voice low, professional, as she spoke to the paramedic at her side. "Prepare 300 milligrams aspirin. No nitro yet BP is unstable." The young paramedic glanced at her, slightly intimidated. "You really are a cardiologist?" "Was," she replied without looking up. "A long time ago." Augusto's eyes flickered open briefly, searching her face. Her voice reached him through the fog, but he couldn't quite place the warmth in it, warmth that contrasted sharply with the cold, transactional world he lived in. The AE at Hospital Serial Libanas was a flurry of motion. As soon as they burst through the doors, the team of specialists took over. But even as they wheeled him toward the cath lab, the head physician, a man in his 60s with steel-gray hair, paused when he saw Livia. "Livia?" His voice carried surprise and something else, respect. She gave a faint smile. "Hello, Dr. Ramos. You vanished," he said quietly, almost accusingly. 12 years, no calls, no conferences, and now I hear you're cleaning offices? "I'll explain another day," she replied. "Right now, you have a patient in critical condition." Ramos's gaze softened. "You saved him?" She nodded. He didn't press further. "Then I owe you dinner, and maybe so will he." 2 floors above, in the cardiac unit, Augusto lay connected to monitors, his breathing shallow but steady. The sedatives kept him from speaking, but not from thinking. In his world, people were either assets or liabilities. And yet, the woman who had saved him was neither. She was an anomaly. He remembered her eyes as she worked on him, focused, unshaken, almost defiant. The same eyes that had avoided his 2 days earlier when he dismissed her without a thought. Why would someone with that kind of skill be mopping floors in a corporate tower? The question lodged itself in his mind like a thorn. That night, the city glittered under the rain-slicked streets. Livia sat in her tiny apartment, peeling off the gloves from her cleaning shift at another office. The events of the day replayed in her head, the weight of Augusto's hand in hers, his whispered "why," and the rush of adrenaline that still hadn't completely faded. She reached into a small wooden box in the drawer and pulled out an old photo. Herself in a white coat, standing beside a hospital bed, a smiling teenage boy giving a thumbs up to the camera, her younger brother. Gone now 10 years. She traced the edge of the photo with her thumb, her jaw tightening. A knock at the door startled her. It was nearly midnight. When she opened it, Fernanda stood there, hair damp from the rain, eyes filled with urgency. "Mr. Vilas wants to see you," she said. Tomorrow morning, his private penthouse. The morning sky over Snow Paulo was heavy with low clouds, the kind that made the glass towers look like they were reaching into a storm. Livia stood in the lobby of the Altura residence, an exclusive skyscraper where each floor was worth more than most people's entire lives. She clutched the strap of her worn leather bag as the doorman, clearly skeptical, scanned her from head to toe. "Name?" he asked. "Livia Silva," she replied calmly. "Mr. Vilas is expecting me." The doorman's brow furrowed, but after a quick call to the penthouse, he nodded and motioned her toward the private elevator. As the glass doors slid shut, Livia caught her own reflection-neat ponytail, plain mouse, no makeup. The contrast between her and the world she was entering was almost absurd. When the elevator doors opened, the first thing she noticed was the silence. The penthouse was vast floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the sprawling city, and minimalist decor made every sound feel amplified. A single low hum from an air purifier was the only noise. Fernanda greeted her, looking slightly uneasy. "He's in the study, this way." The study smelled faintly of cedar and expensive whiskey. Behind a sleek desk sat Augusto Vilas, dressed in a dark cashmere sweater instead of his usual suit. The monitors behind him displayed muted news channels' market indexes scrolling endlessly. He looked healthier than the day before, but the pallor in his face hadn't completely faded. When he saw her, he straightened, setting down the pen he'd been absently spinning between his fingers. "Sit," he said, his tone clipped but not unkind. She crossed the room and took a seat opposite him. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Augusto broke the silence. "You saved my life yesterday. That's not something I take lightly." He leaned forward, his eyes searching hers. "But I don't believe in miracles. I believe in reasons. So tell me, why is a cardiologist cleaning offices in my building?" Livia's gaze didn't waver. "Because sometimes life decides your career for you." "That's not an answer," he said sharply. "It's the only one you're getting," she replied, her tone even. A flicker of irritation crossed his face. He wasn't used to resistance, especially from someone outside his world. "Do you know how much I pay to keep people like you invisible?" he asked, almost to himself. "And yet, here you are, impossible to ignore." "Is this why you called me here?" she asked. "To insult me?" "No." His voice softened, though his eyes stayed sharp. "I called you here because I want to offer you something." Her brow arched slightly. "A job?" "Not exactly." He reached for a folder on his desk and slid it toward her. Inside was a contractor name printed neatly at the top. "I need a personal medical advisor, on call, discreet. Paid more in a month than you probably make in a year." She closed the folder without reading it. "I'm not for hire." "You're already working for a cleaning company," he said. "Don't pretend money doesn't matter." Her lips tightened. money matters. But it's not the only thing that does. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, two very different people, each used to being in control of their own worlds. Finally, Augusto leaned back, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "You're stubborn," he said. "I like that." "I'm not here for you to like me," she replied. "Maybe not," he said. "But you will be back. Because people like us," he paused, studying her carefully, "we don't cross paths by accident." That night, as Livia walked home through the neon-lit streets, she couldn't shake his words. She had spent years avoiding entanglements with powerful men, years keeping her head down, hiding the truth of her past. And yet, somehow, she had stepped right into the center of a game she wasn't sure she wanted to play. But one thing was certain: Augusto Vilas was not a man who let go once he decided to pull someone into his world. The following morning, Augusto sat alone in the same cedar-scented study, a contract he had offered Livia still lying on his desk. He had dealt with rivals who controlled billions, politicians who could bury scandals with a phone call, and lawyers who could twist truth into a weapon. But this woman, this cleaning lady, who had managed to do something none of them ever had. She'd told him no. That word didn't sit well with him. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Mahler," he said. "Find out everything about her. Name, address, employment records, medical licenses past and present. I want it all." Mahler's voice on the other end was dry and efficient. "Understood? And boundaries?" "None," Augusto replied. Meanwhile, Livia was scrubbing down a glass conference table in another corporate tower across town. A faint scent of disinfectant clung to her skin, the rhythm of her movements steady and practiced. But her mind was far from the room. She knew the look in Augusto Vilas's eyes when she left his penthouse curiosity laced with calculation. It was the same look she'd seen in the eyes of certain surgeons during her hospital days, the ones who didn't just want to save lives, but wanted to own the people who saved them. And she had no intention of being owned again. That evening, Muller's report landed on Augusto's desk. He read it in silence. Name, Livia Silva. Former occupation, cardiologist, Hospital Sirio Libanês. Status, medical license revoked 12 years ago under sealed tribunal decision. Cause, confidential court records restricted. Family, parents deceased. Younger brother, Joe Silva deceased at age 17. Current occupation, contract cleaner, 2 corporate clients. Augusto closed the folder slowly. A sealed tribunal. That was interesting. Sealed cases usually meant something more than negligence. They meant influence. Someone had wanted her erased. Later that night, he found himself standing by the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse, the lights of Snow Paulo sprawling below him like a circuit board. He sipped his whiskey slowly, thinking, who could take a doctor with that kind of skill and bury her so deeply she ended up wiping floors for a living? And more importantly, why? The thought gnawed at him until his phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. You don't want to get involved with her. No signature. No traceable ID. Just a warning. Across the city, Livia sat at her small kitchen table, staring at her phone. She'd received a message too, this one from an old contact she hadn't heard from in years. They're looking into you. Be careful. Her hands tightened around the device. She knew exactly who they were, and she knew exactly how dangerous it was that Augusto Vilas had put her in his sights. 3 days passed before Livia saw Augusto again. She'd begun to believe he might actually let it go, that he'd simply file her under curiosity and move on. But Augusto Vilas was not a man who moved on from unfinished puzzles. It started small, too small to be coincidence. One morning, she arrived at a corporate office, only to find the cleaning rota had been rearranged. The client said the request had come from above. The change placed her in the CEO's private floor alone, where she found a note on the desk. "I still need an answer." As she didn't reply, she simply crumpled the note and dropped it into the trash. That afternoon, she saw him again, by chance, at a quiet coffee shop tucked between two bookshops. He was seated in the corner, reading the Valor Economico, a cappuccino untouched before him. "Do you always drink coffee in the same place you send your cleaners?" she asked dryly, pausing by his table. "I didn't send you here," he said, "but I'm glad you came." He gestured at the chair opposite him. "Sit." She shook her head. "You're wasting your time." "Time," he replied evenly, "is the one thing I don't waste." That night, Livia's sleep was shattered by the old dream, the one she could never completely escape. She was back in the operating room. Bright surgical lights glared down, the air thick with the antiseptic tang of chlorhexidine. Her gloved hands were steady over the open chest of a young man barely 20. His heart stopped, his skin ashen. Pressures dropping. A nurse's voice cut through the hum of monitors. "Epinephrine now," she ordered. She worked faster than protocol allowed, because she recognized the patient's face. Joe, her brother, except it wasn't possible. Joe had been buried for years, and yet here he was, pale and bleeding, and no matter what she did, compressions, shocks, drugs, the flat line refused to leave the screen. The sound of the heart monitor merged with the wail of a police siren. A door slammed. A man's voice, cold and clipped. "Step away from the table, Dr. Silva. This is over." Livia woke with a start, drenched in sweat, her breathing ragged. She pressed her palms to her eyes, trying to banish the images. The dream always ended there. At the moment they took everything from her. And now, Augusto Vilas, with all his money and his questions, was pulling her back toward that day. In his penthouse, Augusto stared at the warning text still sitting on his phone. He had forwarded it to Mueller, who confirmed it was routed through 3 offshore servers. Untraceable. Augusto smiled faintly to himself. Someone out there didn't want him near Livia Silva, which, to a man like him, was the surest invitation to get even closer.